Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending G2 Integrated Solutions webinar, Impacts of New Regulation on Achieving Compliant Control Room and Team Training Programs. My name is Marissa Davis, our marketing specialist here at G2, and I'll be facilitating this morning's presentation. The host of today's webinar, G2 Integrated Solutions, delivers expertise to pipeline operators, utility companies, and other energy stakeholders in 7 specialized service disciplines. We provide end-to-end solutions that help manage risk, assure compliance, and optimize performance. Our commitment is to implement innovative, cost-effective solutions that align specifically with our customers' needs. For more details on our services, please visit our website at www.g2-is.com. All right, now I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Mr. Wallace McGaughey, Jr. Wally is a senior consultant and regulatory technical authority for G2IS and serves to support G2's efforts in providing our clients with the best possible solutions for their regulatory compliance needs. Wally is retired from the PHMSA Office of Training and Qualifications, where he served as course manager for training the federal and state pipeline safety inspectors and team member of the CRM implementation team during both the original publication of the CRM regulation and during the issuance of this current rule modification. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Wally.
And thank you, Marissa. And this morning, we'd like to talk to you about the control room team training regulation and the modifications that came out in January. I appreciate all of you being on the call with us this morning and listening to this webinar. Our agenda for this presentation is going to be talking about the compliance dates, the date that the rule modification occurred, why it took place, what's driving this change, why PHMSA published this rule, whether or not there's going to be additional guidance as far as FAQs or inspection guidelines coming from PHMSA, enforcement expectations, what we may look to expect from PHMSA and how they're going to enforce on this rule, do a job of trying to explain others and supersedes, and of course talk about the actual compliance dates for the 2 segments of the regulation. So what's driving it? There was a pipeline accident back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. In the investigation that took place following that accident, PHMSA discovered that there were personnel in the control room that had access to the controller and had a direct influence over the actions of the controllers that were not qualified or trained in the roles and responsibilities of a person that was tasked with monitoring and controlling a pipeline from the SCADA system in the control room. This is language almost directly out of the accident investigation results, and it specifies and identifies the fact that there were people who superseded the controller's activities that further complicated the incident rather than bringing solution to it. The other personnel were able to influence or supersede the actions of that controller, even though they themselves were not controllers, and they were seen as posing a significant risk to the safe operation of the pipeline. The modification and qualification of others was required to be completed by March 23rd of 2017 as far as the direct and supersede portion of the rule. It was issued in January and it was required to be complied with by March 23rd. One of the questions being asked is, did it create a set of new covered tasks for your operations, or were the others simply qualified as controllers? Have you defined the roles and responsibilities for these others? Have they been added to your program? Since this is underneath the Section B of the regulation, which is defining roles and responsibilities, have they been provided with the adequate information necessary to carry out those roles and responsibilities, since they fall into that same category as a controller? And are they identified in the fatigue mitigation plan, controller training plan, and hours of service plan? So will there be additional guidance as far as FAQ or inspection guidelines are concerned? We can assume that PHMSA will publish some type of guidance on this subject. There was a meeting held by the control room implementation team for PHMSA in September in Oklahoma City, the last week of September. It was indicated from the results of that meeting that there will be some publications coming out in the Federal Register regarding this topic, but when we can expect that to be published is not certain. Hopefully before the first of the year, which would be handy. The key takeaway is that PHMSA won't be doing targeted inspections as we understand it to be, like when the control room rule came out. As you remember, they went around the country and looked at all the control room management programs that were out there. This particular rule modification is not going to initiate that type of inspection activity. However, it will be included in any of your control room inspections that you have coming up. And again, remember, the requirement for identifying those others that can supersede the controller is already enforced. So the questions can be asked about that and can be enforced on today. So we don't want to miss that opportunity of being compliant with the rules. So what are the enforcement expectations? It says that the operator will identify anyone in the control room or that has access to the controller who has the ability or the authority to influence or supersede the actions of the controller. Now, this is in the technical performance of the controller's duties. So anyone that has the opportunity to cause some action of the controller that the controller would not normally do based on their roles and responsibilities as a controller. These personnel identified have to be fully trained and qualified to complete their roles and responsibilities as you identify them in your program. And it's also to be expected that anyone who has access to or can influence the controller's actions that does not have your full authority will also be identified, trained, and instructed not to interfere with the performance of the controller in their duties, which I think is a key element to this. So defining others and supersede. The word others, in my opinion, it would be anyone that has access to the controller, who can influence the actions of the controller, supersede the actions of the controller in the performance of their defined roles and responsibilities. So it's going to require an operator to take a pretty comprehensive look at who these people are and measure their performance and their activities in relationship to the controller, and whether or not anything that they do is going to interfere with or supersede the roles and responsibilities you have assigned to that controller. So who would supersede is anyone in the control room with access to that controller that by their position or rank would be perceived as having authority over the controller's actions by the controller, such as the vice president of operations, a district manager, director, a non-qualified supervisor, anyone that the controller would feel subordinate to, that would feel necessary that they respond to this person's instruction, even though this person may not be qualified in the roles and responsibilities for controlling the pipeline. So team training is the second part of our discussion. The NTSB stated, and this next set of text slides that you're going to see come from an NTSB investigation in their report out to Congress. It says the NTSB stated in their recommendations to PHMSA the following: to the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration, develop requirements for team training of control center staff involved in pipeline operations similar to those used in other transportation modes. Now I'm going to stop right there and tell you that there are other transportation modes regulated by the DOT, such as rail, air, barge, passenger train activities, and so on and so forth, that have control center and control rooms and control room teams that they have already mandated do this type of training. So related to this proposed amendment, the NTSB issued the following safety recommendations to PHMSA on July 25th, 2012. It said, develop requirements for team training of control center staff involved in pipeline operations similar to those used in other transportation modes. This is recommendation P-12-7, and it says, and extend operator qualification requirements, my emphasis, in Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 195, Subpart G, as well as Subpart N in 192, in gas transmission control center staff involved in pipeline operational decisions. This was recommendation P-12-8. Proposed NPRM adds team training requirements as shown in 192, 631, and 446. So NTSB is acknowledging that is there. In the second part of that, it says it also adds language to 631B5 and 446B5 that would require each operator to define the roles and responsibilities and qualifications of others with the authority to direct or supersede the specific technical actions of a controller. Now, those are important words, specific technical actions. In other words, these aren't data transfers of information. These aren't saying that the tank level is X or that the current NOM is at 80% or those sorts of things. It's talking about the fact that this person is going to be instructing the controller to open this valve, close this valve, start this compressor or pump, etc. These proposed regulatory improvements were discussed in the April 8, 2015 NTSB letter to PHMSA, where the PHMSA plan to codify the training guidance previously issued was accepted. So in accepting this proposed change related to operator qualification were also accepted. So the NTSB is acknowledging that the recommendations that were made to them, to PHMSA, and the response of PHMSA in the advisory bulletin and in the proposed regulatory language change that we currently have NTSB agrees that that's what they intended and that's what they wanted to have happen. So what is intended by the other modes idea and how might it apply? So let's take a look at what NTSB was talking about and what PHMSA included in their preamble language, and looking at two other modes of transportation out there. First off, let's talk about air traffic control. Many air traffic control positions are staffed by two controllers working together, one handling radar monitoring and communications tasks, while the other is dealing with the flight data. So what we're talking about is one person who's looking at the radar, monitoring the communications back and forth with the aircraft and in its position. The other person is dealing with flight data. In other words, where is the aircraft in its flight path? Is it approaching the airport? What degree of descent and what angle and slope is it? At what speed is it coming in? Is it in proper position relative to other aircraft in the air around the airport? And it says there is a need for a study of the relationships among workload, teamwork, situational awareness, and operational errors at American air traffic control facilities. So the FAA and the control center teamwork is a defined process that they have for managing these two individuals at the air traffic control centers so that the coordination of effort takes place. Now, along with these, what you don't see in this study are, of course, the ground crews and the movement of the aircraft on the ground, because the overall safety scope is the safe transportation of people, goods, and services, which includes its final docking to its gate, so that it makes sure it transports itself across the airport, the tarmac, to its safe location where it parks the airplane. The second part we're going to look at is control room team training processes for rail. It's a little more defined in the fact that it's identified some of the team names. In this particular example, there are two major teams identified in the rail training programs. One is the elemental team. These are the folks who are consistent across the operating area of the rail operations. So these would be our normal operations and maintenance personnel that we would have out on the field doing normal activities every day on the pipeline, along with our controllers and our operators in the field who manage the manual operations of our pipeline. And it says an example of an elemental team would be a train operating crew for either mainline or yard operations, consisting of the engineer, conductor, with addition of potentially switchman or brakeman to assist in coupling or decoupling of trains and manual operation track switches. So this is the day-to-day operation of moving trains around the country. The interactive teams that they also have identified are those groups of elemental teams that are added to or outside individuals like our contractors who work on our pipeline in order to perform a task that occurs during the course of the workday. So an example of these interactive teams would be a team which is formed when a train dispatcher, a maintenance of way crew, and a train operating crew have to coordinate their efforts to safely move the train in an area of the track where the maintenance of way crew are repairing or maintaining track. So from this, we can start to see how we could have a project crew out working on a manifold system at a valve station, modifying compressor piping, adding instrumentation and controls. At the same time, we're managing the pipeline's operations and moving product from point A to point B, and how that coordinated effort has to take place so that everybody involved knows and understands the intricacies of controlling a pipeline from a SCADA system. So, team training and other moves. So the CRM team training will require operators to conduct a comprehensive assessment of who the team members are, what their roles and responsibilities are, and how they operationally collaborate with the controller. So we're talking about, for each operation that you have out there, for each of you that are on the phone, you have your own unique ways of doing things, and you need to identify who your team members are. Now, there is granted probably some pretty common roles across the industry as to who these folks are, but how they operationally collaborate with the controller is going to vary from operator to operator. So from this assessment, a comprehensive operationally specific training program will need to be established to meet the intent and the letter of this regulation. So it then becomes obvious that off-the-shelf team training packages, albeit are good programs that are out there that teach us communication skills and identifying personal characteristics, identifying who our extroverts are and our introverts are, and albeit those are good programs and they probably would benefit this activity, they don't meet the intent or the purpose of this new regulation. These things have to be configured with the operator's processes included in the training. So those off-the-shelf programs standing alone are not going to help us accomplish the goal here. In subsection B5 of both 631 and 446, it's required to be complied with effective March 23rd, 2017. That's in force and enforceable today. Subsection H6 of both 631 and 446, the operators must comply with the team training requirements under this paragraph no later than January 23rd, 2018. Now, I've been asked, does that mean that the program simply needs to be created or implemented? And I take you to what is the language out of the rule following 195.446 in this second bullet. What the rule says is operators must comply with the team training requirements under this paragraph by no later than January 23rd, 2018. So I would suggest to you that PHMSA was probably fully expecting this to be done since it's been out there and published for over a year. So my contact information is there on the screen. My cell number is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, but the office number they'll relay the message to me, or you can email me at wallace.mcgaughey@g2-is.com. I deeply appreciate you spending time with me today and hearing this presentation. If they have any questions, please feel free to respond to us. We would certainly appreciate it.